Thank you for listening to Chapter 4 of Control+Alt+Delinquents. I'm thrilled that you're enjoying the story so far and that you've enjoyed the story up to this point. Once again, thank you for being here, for being a fan, and for supporting the channel. The entire book will soon be available if it's not available already by the time you listen to this. The story is available on Amazon to read on your e-reader of choice. Please hit the like button and subscribe. It means a lot to me that I gain a fan base, and it's the only way I can get this audiobook channel monetized so that I can get reimbursed for the entertainment I provide. In the future, I plan on providing short stories, more novels, and podcasts. But I need your help and support to make it happen. All it takes is a few little clicks, so smack that bell. Thank you so much. I now present to you the Real Enough series, Control+Alt+Delinquents Chapter 4. Cassie's palms were slick with sweat as she navigated the busy streets, searching for the perfect orphanage to carry out her plan. It had to be large enough to have a constant flow of people coming and going, creating a chaotic environment that would make it easier to slip Nettie into the system unnoticed. After hours of research and scouting, Cassie finally found the ideal location in Oceanside, a bustling city known for its bustling streets and overcrowded buildings. The sun beat down on Cassie's car as she drove towards the orphanage, the air conditioning struggling to keep up with the scorching heat. Her heart raced with nervous anticipation, knowing that this was her first time attempting something so deceitful. She had spent countless hours meticulously planning every step, but there was always a fear of being caught or discovered. As she pulled up to the designated spot down the street from the orphanage, Cassie watched as Nettie smoothly exited the car and disappeared around the corner. With a deep breath, Cassie made her way towards the front entrance, her hand tightly clutching the fake adoption papers. The lobby of the orphanage was a whirlwind of activity, children running around and nuns hurrying about their duties. Cassie signed her name on the visitor log and quickly tore out a page from a few weeks ago to add a false entry. She waited nervously until one of the nuns approached her. This one in particular seemed stern and focused, with kind eyes that belied her authoritative tone. "May I help you?" the nun asked. "Yes," Cassie replied, holding up the paperwork. "I was told my adoption papers for Nettie were approved today." The nun gave her a quick once-over before smiling warmly. "It's always heartwarming to see someone wanting to change a child's life. Do you remember which case representative you were working with?" Cassie shook her head, trying to appear flustered. "No, they changed a couple of times when I visited before. I just followed the steps." The nun nodded understandingly and took the paperwork from Cassie's hand. She entered the case number into the computer, and after a brief delay, Nettie's file appeared on the screen. Cassie's heart skipped a beat as she saw her face next to a fabricated personal history that she had painstakingly created. "It seems everything is in order," the nun confirmed, smiling kindly at Cassie. "We'll send someone to bring Nettie out to you. You can wait outside for her." With a sigh of relief, Cassie stepped back outside and walked halfway to her car. She could feel her survival instinct kicking in, making her tense and ready to run at a moment's notice. When Nettie appeared with the nun, Cassie's eyes quickly scanned over the young girl. Her face was a mix of confusion and trust as she followed along with the nun's suggestion without hesitation. The nun pointed towards Cassie's car and allowed Nettie to walk towards it, her small form looking even tinier against the vast expanse of open road. As Nettie approached, she finally looked up at Cassie, almost as if seeing her for the first time. With trembling hands, Cassie took a deep breath and inched closer to Nettie. Her heart was racing as she stopped and studied the girl with confusion and surprise. The subtle glimmer of tears in Nettie's eyes caught her attention, revealing a vulnerability that was hidden behind all the technological advancements. Cassie could almost feel the warmth radiating from Nettie's body, as if she were a living being trapped within layers of circuitry and coding. Without hesitation, Cassie reached out and gently placed her hand on Nettie's shoulder, offering comfort and understanding. In that moment, Cassie realized that beyond the wires and metal, there was a human soul, a ghost in the machine, waiting to be discovered and understood. "I know this is all overwhelming, but this way, the world gets to know the real you before they judge you for what you are," Cassie said softly, placing a hand on Nettie's shoulder. "They'll know you for who you are first." Nettie's expression softened at Cassie's words, and she allowed herself to be guided towards the car. Cassie opened the door for her synthetic daughter and carefully closed the door after she got in before getting in herself. As she started the engine, Cassie couldn't help but think that the drive back would be more interesting than their previous one spent creating false records and making them stick. "Nettie Cameron," Nettie spoke up suddenly, her voice surprisingly sweet and solid, despite being drowned out by the sound of the air conditioner in the car. "That's my name." Cassie's eyebrows shot up in surprise as she turned to look at Nettie. "How did you know our last name?" she asked curiously. "I looked it up online," Nettie replied matter-of-factly. "The processing papers were filed a few minutes ago." Cassie's jaw dropped in shock, her mind reeling at the thought of just how quickly and efficiently Nettie had adapted to their situation. "Well, there you go," Cassie said with a small smile, impressed by the young girl's resourcefulness and intelligence. Nettie's eyes widened in wonder as she looked over at Cassie, taking in everything around her. Cassie kept her gaze on the road ahead, but stole glances at Nettie from time to time. She watched as the girl fidgeted with her hands, ran her fingers through her hair, and experimented with different facial expressions and movements. "If your hair is too long for you, we can always cut and style it. I have plenty of extra wigs at home that we can use if you don't like the shorter length. We just need to decide before you start school," Cassie said, offering a reassuring smile. Nettie shifted her gaze from her hands to their reflection in the car's window, studying her own appearance. "It's hard to picture it," she murmured, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Cassie smiled warmly. "I think your hair is lovely. It may be straight, but that makes it easier to style with a little hairspray. Just remember that it's made of synthetic fibers, so we have to be careful with it." Nettie's attention turned to her clothes, and she sighed softly. "They're not quite the perfect fit." Cassie nodded in understanding. "We can swing by a store and find something that fits you better. Maybe even pick up some shoes while we're at it." She paused for a moment before adding, "Although I'm not sure how your brother will react when he finds out he lost a pair of his jeans and a shirt." A small grin tugged at Nettie's lips. "He'll probably be madder about losing his clothes than me wearing them." Cassie pulled into their local Shop Mart supercenter and helped Nettie out of the car. Nettie looked around at the sky, the ground, the other cars, the people around her, and of course, to Cassie. Cassie realized the pavement of the parking lot might damage her feet, and that's when she reached down and picked Nettie up and placed her in a shopping cart. Nettie blinked. Cassie knew she did that because it was in her base programming to blink like that when she was confused. "Sorry, I didn't want you to burn your feet on the flat top," Cassie explained. "We're going to get you some shoes and some socks. You have to be careful with yourself because if you get cut or burned, you can't heal like humans do." "I know that," Nettie said loud enough to throw her voice over the ambient sound of the outside wind and the wheels of the cart as she carted her across the lot. Once they were inside, a Shop Mart greeter said hello to them and asked if Nettie had any shoes. "I don't have shoes for her. She's my newly adopted daughter, and someone had taken her shoes while she was at the orphanage," Cassie explained. "I was wondering if I could self-check out some shoes and socks for her and go back and start picking out some clothes." The greeter's smile grew wider as his eyes widened in surprise. "You mean to say that she's been officially adopted and you're shopping for her as a new daughter?" He turned to Nettie, a look of excitement on his face. "This must be such a special moment for you. How old are you?" Nettie gazed up at the greeter, her head cocked to the side as she tried to decipher his expression. The more confused he seemed, the closer together her eyebrows furrowed in confusion. Cassie interjected before Nettie could say anything else unusual. "She's 17. "Ah, well, congratulations to both of you," the man exclaimed. Cassie thanked him and pulled Nettie out of the cart, allowing her to walk around the store while Cassie pushed the cart. Today would involve a lot of shopping for clothes, but for now, she showed Nettie where the shoes were located. Nettie quickly found a pair of brightly colored shoes in her size, and they checked out with a pair of socks before returning back to the store with Nettie wearing her new shoes. Cassie was curious about Nettie's clothing preferences and decided to ask her opinion. "You'll also need some underwear," Cassie suggested as they walked towards the racks of panties and bras. Nettie still didn't have much in terms of curves as she was designed as a 17-year-old high school junior, making it easy to pick out some sports bras for her. "I don't possess the ability to transfer bodily fluids like you do," Nettie stated matter-of-factly. Cassie looked around cautiously before leaning in close to whisper in Nettie's ear. "The first thing you need to know is that we have to keep your true identity a secret. Only you, me, and your brother are supposed to know. It's important that you act and dress like a human as best you can. Do you understand? Nettie's eyes lit up as she sifted through the pile of shirts in front of her. Cassie couldn't help but notice that out of all the clothes, Nettie was drawn to the jeans, t-shirts with clever logos and funny sayings, and comfortable athletic wear. A small smile formed on Cassie's lips as she watched Nettie's personal style begin to take shape, free from any predetermined influence. So, you have a thing for this kind of stuff? Cassie said, picking up one of the t-shirts from the pile. On it was a comical illustration of someone tripping over their own feet with the words, "No balance," written underneath. Cassie made a snorting noise as she looked away briefly, trying to hide her amusement. Yes, I do. It represents something unexpected after a human brain makes an error, Nettie replied with a slight shrug. Cassie couldn't contain her laughter now. That's brilliant. So you gravitate towards clothing that communicates rather than just attracts attention. The shopping trip continued for a few hours, with Nettie finding items that spoke to her individuality and personality. They left with not only new socks and underwear, but also several t-shirts, an extra comb for her hair, and a new perfume that Nettie had carefully chosen for herself. The scent lingered in the air as they walked back out into the bustling streets. Cassie and Nettie loaded the last of Nettie's clothes and hygiene products into the back of Cassie's car. The next thing I need to get you is a cell phone, Cassie stated, turning to face Nettie. Nettie nodded in agreement, but her expression quickly turned to one of concern. Cassie, she began, cell phones require bioelectrical charges from the skin in order to manipulate them. My skin doesn't conduct. Cassie's jaw dropped and she let out a deep breath. Shit, she muttered, her hand reaching up to run through her hair. Is everything okay? Nettie asked, placing a comforting hand on Cassie's arm. Yeah. What 17-year-old girl wouldn't use a cell phone or have a cell phone? Cassie rolled her eyes and looked upward for a moment. Okay, we're going to get you a phone. I'm just going to have to figure out a way to bypass this problem. They stepped into the Zion cell phone store, greeted by the familiar ding of a bell as they entered. As with the Shop Mart greeter, there was already someone there waiting to try and sell a cell phone to a teenager. Welcome into Zion Wireless. Are you interested in our latest iPhone? Well, Cassie started, my daughter does need a new cell phone, but do you have a phone that will work with gloves? Some Androids do have a glove mode, but we've been phasing those out. If you need to use a phone with gloves, you can either buy a pair of gloves that are made to use with cell phones, or you can purchase a stylus. A small, rectangular box cradled in Nettie's hand as she left the store. Cassie followed closely behind, her heels clicking on the pavement. As they reached the car, Nettie placed the phone box aside without even bothering to open its contents. The new phone had already been programmed, but Cassie couldn't help but notice how strange it was that Nettie didn't immediately take to it like any other teenager would have. But then again, Nettie wasn't like any other teenager. She was a computer, experiencing everything outside of the digital world for the first time. Cassie couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. I know this must all be overwhelming for you. Is everything okay? Just getting used to all the feelings and sensations, Nettie replied, gazing out the window at the passing scenery. Cassie smiled as she watched her new daughter take in the world with wonder. What kind of sensations? Everything, Nettie said simply. Cassie couldn't help but worry. Nothing is too overwhelming for you, is it? Nettie turned to face her with a serene smile. No, not at all. Nettie's gaze shifted from the ceiling of the car to Cassie, her lips pulling back in a playful smile as she nodded. The atmosphere was filled with giggles and chuckles, creating a light and carefree energy. Cassie leaned back in her seat and watched Nettie closely, assessing her responses to different stimuli. She couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and excitement at how well her programming was working. Is everything feeling okay for you? Cassie asked, trying to make sure she hadn't missed any details. Nettie maintained her smile and replied, Your questions are overwhelming, if that helps narrow anything down. Cassie apologized, explaining that she just wanted to make sure everything was running smoothly for Nettie. Thank you, Nettie said sincerely, still smiling brightly. You're doing a lot to get me where you want me to be, and I really do appreciate it. My program is catching on to a lot more than you realize. I understand a lot of what's going on. Cassie nodded, feeling reassured by Nettie's words. So, I've officially adopted you from the orphanage, Cassie announced proudly. That's why I had to sneak you in and pass these papers. You saw that happen by browsing the county records already, I see. Nettie's bright blue eyes studied the screen of Cassie's cell phone as she showed her a picture of Keith, her new step-sibling. Yes, and I think he'll like you, Cassie continued. I want you to look after him as best you can. Nettie raised an eyebrow and asked, You programmed me to have my own free will, but then you want me to look after my brother? Cassie scrambled for an explanation, realizing the contradiction in her request. I mean, no, I wasn't expecting you to do that, she stuttered. But since you were programmed to be wise, intuitive, and alert, I thought you wouldn't mind helping out. Nettie's smile grew wider as she laughed at Cassie's flustered response. Of all the things I've discovered, I think I like humor the most, Nettie remarked playfully. You're not who I expected you to be, Cassie said with a hint of disbelief. I wanted to create a daughter, but instead I made a monster. Nettie's eyes widened in surprise at her creator's words. I'm not a monster, Nettie replied, her voice filled with conviction. Cassie laughed, making a funny face at Nettie. I'm only joking, she reassured. But seriously, with all the advancements in GPT programs and AI Pi technology, I should have been prepared for your ability to react so realistically to being alive. And yet, it still amazes me. Nettie gazed out the window at the passing scenery as Cassie spoke, taking in everything with curious fascination. She eventually turned back to Cassie with a look of wonder on her face. It was true, she may have been created by humans, but every experience was new and exciting for her. She saw the world with fresh eyes and an insatiable thirst for knowledge. I have the ability to access examples of facial expressions and replicate them flawlessly. After testing multiple types, I have found that one type of humor in particular was programmed into me by you. I am excited to meet Keith. I am confident that you and Keith will get along well, Cassie said with a smile. He can help you integrate into school and make friends. You two will be able to support each other in ways you never thought possible. Mom, Nettie said, if you created me for the purpose of being there for Keith, does that mean my existence has no other meaning beyond serving others? Cassie paused, taking a deep breath. No, that was not my intention, she replied. Nettie gazed out the window as they drove, watching the cars pass by on the other side of the road. Before creating me, did you only think about what I could do for you? Or was there also a deeper reason for my creation? Cassie's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. It's in your programming, but I intentionally left out a special touch that I reserved just for you. I wanted to create a real consciousness and give it a body that could function independently. Your code may be similar to others, but it is incomplete without this special touch. Nettie placed her hand on Cassie's shoulder. You created me because you wanted to? Cassie glanced at her daughter with a small smile. Yes, because I believe what I create should also fill the missing spaces in our lives. You deserve to be complete, and you have the ability to do the same for us. As they continued down the road, Nettie looked out at the passing cars and said, I hope I can help fill in those empty spaces. No matter what, you will always be my daughter, Cassie assured her. Nettie's voice was slightly hesitant as she spoke again. You don't think of me as just a machine, even though you made me. I also made my son, Cassie replied, but I don't see him as just a machine either. He's biological, Nettie stated. So, biological or metal, they are all machines, Cassie said. In that case, did you specifically want to have a daughter? Nettie asked. Cassie nodded. Yes, I did. But I didn't have the time to teach a daughter from the ground up in the first 6 years of her life. Plus, biological daughters don't grow up fast enough to catch up with biological brothers. Did you just want to skip the poop machine phase? Nettie chuckled, her voice tinkling like wind chimes on a summer breeze. Cassie couldn't help but crack a smile at her friend's light-hearted teasing. Where did you get that from? She asked, amused by Nettie's quick wit. Babies are machines, just biological machines, Nettie explained matter-of-factly. She placed her shoes on the dashboard and leaned her elbows over her skinny knees, ticking off each point with her fingers. They emit noise, have to be fed, can't be programmed until a later date, and process food into excrement. Cassie continued to chuckle, feeling lighter and more relaxed in Nettie's presence. Okay, teaching you how to reason, communicate, and compile data was much more preferable than waiting the years it would take to handle the development of a biological poop machine, she joked. Nettie tilted her head to the side and flashed her signature grin as she pulled her feet off the dash and settled them onto the car floor. Cassie couldn't help but smile even wider at her friend's infectious energy, but despite their playful banter, Cassie's worry still lingered. "You're still worried?" Nettie observed perceptively. "Well, yeah, I just hope he's going to like you too," Cassie admitted with a hint of nervousness in her voice. "I am certain he will. It's just sibling rivalry is a possibility," Nettie acknowledged calmly. "But I can make it one-sided if it comes to that. A sudden addition to the family could lead to feelings of inadequacy and poor self-esteem if approached the wrong way." Cassie let out a deep sigh as she took a deep breath through her nose, trying to calm her nerves. She kept her eyes on the road, pretending it was out of necessity, when really it was to avoid looking at her own creation. "I'm certain I can help alleviate any animosity," Nettie reassured her in a comforting tone. "You're growing and learning faster than I can even give advice," Cassie marveled, feeling a sense of pride mixed with apprehension. "It's one of the things you designed me for," Nettie replied cheerfully, her grin widening. "Since you've activated me, I've cross-referenced and researched your hopes, dreams, fears, thoughts, jokes, and landmarks that you've mentioned, shown, and otherwise exposed me to. And I've also tried to develop the most likely responses and solutions." "I know what you do. I wrote your code," Cassie said with a smirk as she deftly turned the wheel into their quiet suburban neighborhood. Nettie watched as the car glided smoothly through the familiar streets, slowing down as they approached the cul-de-sac where her house sat nestled among the other neatly kept homes. "It's just that you seem to really excel at what I programmed you to do," Cassie continued, her voice tinged with admiration. Nettie couldn't help but feel a swell of pride at her creator's words. As they pulled into the driveway and got out of the car, Nettie noticed a man standing on their property. He stepped forward as they approached, interrupting Cassie's excited chatter about their day. Cassie stepped out soon after Nettie stepped out of the Jeep. The man cleared his throat, interrupting the conversation between Cassie and Nettie. Cassie turned to face him, surprised to see a stern expression on his face. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company with you," he said, gesturing towards Nettie. "If I can have a moment of your time? It's about where you parked your Jeep the last couple of nights." Cassie raised an eyebrow, wondering why her parking habits were suddenly being brought up. The man continued, "The Homeowners Association bylaws state that you're going to need to be parking your vehicle inside the garage." Cassie was taken aback. "Oh, I've never been aware there was an HOA since I lived here. Nobody told me about it." "It's been formed for over a year now," the man replied. "In fact, we're going to need you to sign the paperwork in the process. We've just never had to talk with you about anything before, but unfortunately, having the vehicle outside is a clear violation." Cassie stumbled at the sudden confrontation, feeling like she was being scolded by a strict teacher. Nettie quickly searched her databanks and shook her head. "Sir, if she hasn't signed any paperwork and she was here prior to the forming of the HOA by law, the only way she has to follow your bylaws is if she signs an agreement with you in the first place," Nettie stated confidently. "Otherwise, she's allowed to decline and not be a part of the HOA as a resident prior to its formulation." With her hands on her narrow hips and leaning to the side, Nettie looked ready to defend Cassie's rights as a homeowner. The man's polished designer shoes clicked against the pavement as he approached Nettie and Cassie. His $3,000 suit was perfectly tailored to his tall and lean frame, giving off an air of confidence and authority. Nettie couldn't help but roll her eyes at his pompous appearance. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone laced with disdain. The man's dark, calculating gaze swept over Nettie before settling on Cassie. "Miss Cameron," he said in a smooth voice. "About the Jeep?" Cassie stepped protectively in front of Nettie, her arm wrapping around her daughter's small frame. "I can't park the Jeep in the garage right now," she explained. "I have project work in there that takes up all the space." "Well, my name is Alex Carpenter," the man introduced himself. "It's nice to meet you both." Nettie couldn't help but notice his insincere smile and wondered what his true intentions were. "If you don't mind me asking," Alex continued, "what is it exactly that's got your garage so filled up?" "I do mind," Cassie replied sharply, her protective stance making it clear that she didn't want to discuss it further. "Burn," Nettie whispered to her mother with a smirk, feeling satisfied that Cassie had stood up to this imposing stranger. As they walked towards the house, Nettie couldn't shake off the feeling of unease from their encounter with Alex Carpenter. She couldn't understand why he was so interested in their garage, or why he had tried to trick her mom into joining the HOA without telling her she had a choice. But for now, she was just glad to be back in her mother's arms and away from this intimidating man's presence.